There was once a man called Thoradale who lived in Evie, and he was married and had 3 grown-up sons. But sadly his wife died, and after a while he decided that he would take another wife, and he married a young woman who was considered to be one of the greatest beauties in all of the parish, and they were very happy together for a time. But one day they were down at the shore, gathering shellfish for the bait for their fish hooks, and the man sat down to tie his rivlin, his shoe, and he heard a scream. He turned around to see his wife being pulled into a boat by a Finn man. Now, Finn men live under the sea in palaces made of crystal and coral, but they also have islands called Heldaland that they live on, that float on the surface of the sea. It's their summer home. But anyway, the Finn man was dragging his wife into the boat. He ran after her, but the Finn man pulled on the oars of his boat and it disappeared across the sea. They are great sorcerers and use magic to propel their boats. Thoradale went down on his knees below the low water mark and swore that he would one day have his revenge on the Finfolk. Now, time passed, and Thoradale was out fishing in the Sound between Evie and Rousey. There was no Ein Hollow there in those days. And when he was fishing, he heard a woman sing to him. He recognized the voice as being that of his wife. And she said, "Good man, greet no more for me again you'll never see. But if of vengeance you'd have joy, go spear the wise spaewife ahoy." She was telling her husband that if he wished to have his revenge, he would have to go and meet the wise woman on Hoy. He hurried home. He put his silver in his stocking and took a staff in his hand, and he headed off to the island of Hoy, and there he met the spaewife. And she said to him he would never be able to get his wife back. But the one thing that the Finfolk hate more than anything else is to lose any part of Heldaland, their hidden islands. And she taught him how he would have the power to see it, because no mortal eyes can ever gaze on Heldaland. He went home and he did what the spaewife told him. He went to the Odin Stone that stood next to the stones of Stennis, a standing stone with a hole through it. He went there on 9 nights, on the night of the full moon, and he went 9 times on his knees around the stone, and he looked through the hole, and at the end of the 9th night he was shown what he had to do in order to win part of Heldaland. He went home and he prepared a meal gurnal, a big wooden chest, and he filled it with salt, and he had 3 cases set aside, straw baskets. And he told his 3 sons what they must do when he gave the order. One summer's day, Thoradale went out of his house. He yawned and stretched, and he looked over the Sound towards Rousey, and there, lying in the middle of the Sound, was a beautiful green island that had never been there before. Now he shouted to his sons to make ready, and he went down to his boat, never taking his eyes off that island, because if he did, he knew that he would never have the power to see it again. The boys took the meal gurnal with the salt down to the boat and the cases, and they set off and they started to row. They rowed in the direction that their father told them to, because they couldn't see the island. Only Thoradale could, and he stood in the bow of the boat and ordered where to go. Now, as they were rowing, a great school of whales came swimming in. Now the boys said that they should try to drive some ashore, because the oil was very valuable. But Thoradale said no. Keep rowing. One of the whales, the biggest, broke away from the rest, and it swam towards them with its mouth wide open like it was going to swallow them. The boys were afraid, but Thoradale just coolly picked up a handful of salt and threw it at the great monster whale, and it disappeared. It was only a magical trick of the Finfolk, using their sorcery to try to scare away these human raiders. They got further, nearer and nearer to the island, and the mermaids who were sitting on the shore started to sing the most beautiful song. Now, the boys, when they heard this, they started rowing slower and slower, being absolutely intoxicated by the beautiful music of the mermaids. But Thoradale just gave the two nearest him a sharp kick and told them to keep rowing. They did, nearing the shore, and Thoradale took 2 crosses made of twisted tangles, kelp stems, and he threw them at the mermaids, shouting, "Away with you, you unholy limmers!" The mermaids screamed when they saw crosses heading towards them. There was one thing that the Finfolk and the mermaids could not stand, was the sight of the cross. And then the next thing the boys knew was the boat grounded on a gravel beach. Now Thoradale sprang ashore, and there in front of him was a huge monster with tusks as long as a man's arm and feet as round as millstones, and it spat fire from its mouth. But Thoradale grabbed another handful of salt and threw at the monster, and it disappeared with a terrible growl. And there in its place stood the Fin Man, the same one that had stolen his wife. And he had a drawn sword in his hand, and he said, "Go away with you, you human robbers. I know why you've come here. You've come to steal the part of Hildeland, and if you don't go, I will defile its soil with your horrible human blood." Now the sons were afraid and shouted to the father to come away, but he wasn't afraid. The Fin Man lunged at him with a sword, but he jumped to one side, and he had another cross that he had made from a kind of sticky grass they call cloggers. And he threw it at the Fin Man with all his might, and it stuck on the Fin Man's forehead, and being a cross, it burnt into his flesh. He screamed with pain, but he couldn't pull it away because he would have burnt his fingers if he'd tried. He ran off, wailing and cursing. Thoradale told his sons to get out the boat and prepare the meal gunwale, fill the cases with salt, and walk around the island. The 3 sons walked around Ein Hollow, sewing a ring of salt behind them. The 3 of them went 3 times around the island, sewing rings of salt all the way around it to sanctify it and fix it. 9 rings of salt in all around Ein Hollow. Thoradale cut 9 crosses into the turf of the island as well, just to make sure that it would stay. Now, as they did this, the Finfolk roared and cursed and ran into the sea. The mermaids screamed. The beautiful blue cattle bellowed and ran down the hillside into the sea and were gone. Now, the youngest son had big hands, and he used a bit too much salt. So he'd run out by the time that he was nearing the end of his last ring. He asked his brothers if he could borrow some salt from them to finish it off, but they didn't have any to spare. They needed all the salt to finish their own rings. And so the 9th ring of salt was never completed around the island. And they say that there is still some of the Finfolk's magic lingers in that island. They say that no rats, cats, or mice can live there, and if you cut corn after sunset, then the stalks bleed. And if you try to tether a horse or a cow with a metal stake, as soon as the sun sets, the metal chumps out of the ground. It was still believed to this day that that island of Ein Hollow is a bit special. Ein Hollow, Clara's Lament. He came to me last night, and I kissed the sea foam from his lips. How bitter and cold was that kiss! Then I awoke, and the tears fell like summer rain. The tears I have shed could fill an ocean since he was stolen from me. Yet every day I confront it, the place where it happened, and where my joy ended. The Ein Hollow sound is quiet today, peaceful even, yet it has a hunger that no one can satisfy. No matter how many of our loved ones it devours, it still demands more. When I was a child, my mother would sing, Ein Hollow frank, Ein Hollow free, Ein Hollow stands in the middle of the sea, with a roaring roost on either side. Ein Hollow stands in the middle of the tide. Grandad would tell me how the Finfolk once lived there, until a brave man and his sons took it from them, making it visible for all to see. I wish that man had left it hidden. He had lost his wife, the story says, and now I have lost my husband, when the roost caught his boat and turned it over and carried him away from me. Oh, how we searched those shores, the living longing for the dead, yearning for them, to bring them home one last time, to cover them with earth and tears. But they never returned. No body to weep over, no grave to mourn by, wives and bairns alone and destitute, facing eviction now that the breadwinner is gone. Lairds and factors see no profit in people. No pity stirs in their hearts or moves them to charity. We will have to find another roof to shelter under. So now I sit and my heart aches as I look towards Ein Hollow. There is no comfort, no future, although I am only 19. I was not wedded for more than 7 months before that fateful day dawned when we kissed goodbye. There's good fishing around Ein Hollow, and the men know those waters better than they know their own wives' face. There is no danger. But the sea claimed them all that day. A terrible tribute it demands in return for its bounty. I screamed when the news came, not believing it could be true. How could he be gone, my young Robbie, my own true love? At night I wrap myself in a shawl and sit under the stars, listening to the song that drifts across the water from Ein Hollow. The Selkies sing their lament in wailing voices. Ghost-like it quivers, then fades into the far distance. Did I hear him? Did he call to me? Was it him? My heart told me that he was amongst them, just as the old folk used to say. A Selkie is the soul of one who has drowned, fated to swim the seas until the night when they can dance in their human form, but only until the sunrise forces them back to their ocean realm. I listen. Every nerve in my body tingles with hope.
How can I feel hope? It deserted me on that terrible day. Yet I feel it start to stir inside me now. Can it be true? Can he have returned to me? I listen to the Selkie's song, and one voice rises above the others. It sings of a lost love, forever sundered by death's cold embrace. It is him. I am sure of it. I rise and walk down the sloping ground towards the shore. The song grows louder and more beautiful. Come to me, my love, he sings. I cannot hear the words, but I know their meaning. I reach the shore and walk over the rocks, slippery with seaweed, a jagged ballroom, but tonight I will dance again in my lover's arms. The song is louder than ever now, rising and falling, a choir from another world, calling to me to join them in the song. I take off my shawl, fold it and lay it on a rock. I won't be needing it anymore. I am going to my new home, one that no laird or factor can take from me. Tonight I will swim with Robbie. The water is cold, and my body quakes as I wade into its depths. The surge of the sea pushes me like a rejection. Go home. It is not yet your time, it seems to say. But I set my course, further and further from the shore, until the power of the waves takes me and carries me away. The cold is like daggers of ice, and the salt water burns my eyes. They should be used to it after months of tears. I can't swim, and am helpless against the power of the sea. I panic as the salt water fills my mouth, and I choke for breath. But I will sing with you on Ein Hollow, Robbie, when I'm a Selkie too. Our voices will mingle into one song of love, lost and found again. I feel myself pulled down, sinking into eternity. The sight grows dim in my eyes, and I see no more. A calmness soothes my soul before its flight. Robbie, I'm coming. Wait for me. Clara's family searched the same shore where they looked for Robbie just 3 months before. They found her shawl, neatly folded, lying on a rock. Then they found her body, seaweed tangled in her hair, yet on her face was a peaceful smile. Her father carried his little girl home one last time, while 2 seals slipped into the water and swam towards Ein Hollow. Ein Hollow, Brother Dagkin's Lament. I sit and watch the sun yield to the ocean's cold embrace, cheered only by a flagon of strong ale. The young monks laugh at me for having foam on my lips, but did the good Lord himself not turn water into wine? He was flesh too once, and laughed and wept with us in our frailty. I am a small man, sitting on a small island a long way from the land where he dwelt amongst us, where I dreamed of going, but never went. Fearful of the ways of the world, I shunned the Holy Land, while murderers washed away blood and sins in Jordan's waters. He washed there, the kinslayer. God, how that holy river must have choked on his foul crimes. Sailors will murder each other when the ale takes their minds, and passion's spark is whipped into a flame. But for a Jarl of Orkney to crimson his hands in his cousin's blood, and a holy man too, as we all knew who saw him die. Jarl Magnus, the saint, made 3 offers to save the sinner's soul. Pilgrimage and exile were scorned, but cruel maiming Hakon accepted. Yet the wolves bayed for blood, and Jarl Hakon trembled at their howls. "Kill him! I do not want to die," he said. Bad conscience makes cowards of us all. While the wolves found courage in howling, they shrank from the deed they had demanded. Not one of those grand chieftains would tear life's breath from Magnus's lips. They compelled the poor cook to be the instrument of their malice, as he had just slaughtered a lamb for his master's repast. The hapless Liffolf still held the axe that dripped with the lamb's blood. "We have another lamb for you to kill," laughed the wicked ones, "but this one was from God's own flock." Magnus comforted him, as Liffolf was also condemned by the mob. Liffolf wept on the neck of the man that he was about to kill, like a child weeps in his mother's embrace. I was a young man then, serving in Bishop William's chapel. The bishop stood by and watched this atrocity occur. He was no friend of Magnus, and ambition burned within his heart. I cried out, "No! This cannot be! It breaks all the laws of man and God." But the bishop fixed me with a wolf's eye and ordered my silence. Magnus prayed for his murderers and for his own soul. Then he bowed his head and took the axe. The lamb's blood was mixed with that of another. They refused him burial, as his blood darkened the soil around him. Then they drank and feasted, and laughter rang out over the broken body of Magnus Erlson, Jarl of Orkney, saint. Once the longships had left our shore, we were left with bird calls in the twilight of that terrible day. The horsecock drummed in the grimlands as I went to get a spade. "What are you doing, Dagfinn?" the other novices asked. "I am going to bury Magnus," I said, defiant of Jarl and Bishop. Some warned me not to do it. Others also fetched spades. We buried him where he fell, a rank piece of moorland overlooking the sea towards Rousey. For my punishment I was sent away from Egglesey, away from the bishop's wolf eyes, to live a simple life of devotion and prayer, to a small island that looks towards the sun's end. I was sent as a monk to pray for the soul of Jarl Hakon, although no one prays for him any more. Now we pray for the immortal soul of Magnus, whose body was taken to the great kirk in Bursey to rest. Miracles attested for what we already knew, and the patch of stone and rank weeds where we buried him has become green and bespangled with flowers. I would love to see it now, but I dare not while Bishop William lives. He was bought with a cathedral to house St. Magnus's bones, and he shuns those who knew where his loyalties once lay. Now my life draws to a close, and I reflect on all that I've seen, as I sit on the holy island which I have grown to love. Now the wolves who howled for Magnus's blood send their whelps here to be educated by me. You can see the lust for blood in their eyes. They will revel in death and destruction, and pay little heed to Holy Scripture. The abbot will be carried to Kirkwall for burial in the cathedral, or over to Bursey, where Magnus's remains once lay. It is the fashionable thing to do these days. But my bones will lie here, where they belong, beneath this green sward of Ein Hollow. In my eternal rest I can listen to the song of the seals as they howl their laments for some great loss of which I know not. Their howls are not like those of the wolves who cry for blood, but are gentle and haunting, soft and kind. I love to listen to them sing on the shore at sunset, as I drink my ale and remember all that has been. It lies in my mind that this small scrap of land and rock caught between the swirling tides of the oceans was once called Finnsey, Finn's Island, although our books mention him not. Maybe on death I will know the mystery of the seal's song, and they will tell me. Ein Hollow, the Finfolk's Lament. I can still hear the cries when night comes softly with a bag full of dreams. Screams tear through my mind, lamentations the like of which I have never had to endure. Oh, how we wept that day, we children too small to understand. How the men cursed and swore vengeance, spitting hate and spite from their twisted lips. But it was to no avail. Everything was lost in a circle of salt. The air drinkers came, like thieves without compassion, spurred on by revenge for another theft, that of a wife, newly wed, who danced on the shore. He shouldn't have done it, we knew that, but his desire consumed his reason, and he pulled her into his boat. No good would come of it, the elders said, but his mind was closed to their words. She sang a song that pierced the enchantment, sending words of wisdom to her lost husband. He learned the secret from a wise woman, to see that which was concealed. He saw our island, hidden from mortal gaze, and knew the means by which he could win it. A dark curse lay on that bright day of sunshine and lark song, when our island lost its shield, as we bairns sat singing to the Selkies, our sea-tossed brethren. The sea-steed was seen on the whale road, bringing a fatal kiss to our shores. Mist would not blind those eyes and hide our isle from the power of the witch's charm. The elders gathered, raising their arms outstretched, muttering spells to cloak us. Whales were conjured from sea foam, huge shapes that would terrify the unwary. But he was immune to our tricks, and a handful of salt broke the dream. The song of the mermaid, sweet and intoxicating, drifted on the air and wrapped around the air drinkers' sons, filling their head with honey and longing. But the old man remembered his young bride and his cold bed, and he cast crosses to stop their tongues. Now his feet had found our shore, and a last phantom was created to turn his course. A monster that drank fire like he drank air stood before him, and a slow growl made the ground tremble. But a gift of salt dissolved it into nothingness. Now he stood proud, sword in hand, cursing the invader. Go now while ye still can, or suffer my blade. The air drinker, unflinching, met his gaze. You stole my wife, so I will take your island as her dowry. Another cross flew, filling the Finn man with fear, causing him to flee, tearing his flesh at the pain of its touch. Then the others came with the white curse, the bane of Hildeland, sowing circles of salt. 3 times 3 they circled the island, sowing rings of salt. It would reap a bitter harvest for the Finfolk. 9 crosses sealed its fate, torn into the island's flesh. The Finfolk cried out in pain and sorrow. To lose this island was like losing a limb. I can still hear the screams at night when sleep spurns me. Waking dreams of trauma haunt me yet. The island was lost, its magic shattered like glass. We could not return to its solid skin. The air drinkers gave it a new name for its christening. Hildeland the fair became Ein Hollow the blessed. Now new songs are sung on the island, and words that we dare not utter fill the air. But yet the magic lingers. The youngest son's hands were big, and he wasted his salt, sowing thick rings on the green grass. His brothers had none to spare, or their circles would be broken as well. So the 9th ring is incomplete, and some of the Finfolk's magic remains, mixed with the earth and stone. But the Selkies returned to our lost home, and they raised their voices in song. A lamentation of lost drifts to us from over the sea.